Hey there, Alex Kidman here, and this is my review of the Oppo Reno11F 5G. It's got a name like a Star Wars droid, and it's the first Oppo phone I've reviewed in, well, let's say quite a while. But is it any good? Short answer, yes. Long answer, well, keep on watching. But before I start, I do want to say thank you to everyone who's subscribed recently. It's great. Lovely to see the channel growing. If you haven't subscribed yet, please do consider hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button, share these videos, go and see everything else that I've done because I've covered a lot of technology recently. It's been fun. But of course, you're here because you want to know about this particular phone. So let's get to it by first of all talking about the design. So from the front, the Reno11F 5G presents you a 6.7-inch, 120Hz capable OLED display. The resolution is 1080 by 2412 in a 29 aspect ratio. And look, it's a nice display. It's nice and bright, it's nice and clear. I will say, by default, Oppo puts it on its vivid setting, which I don't like. It's just that little bit too much for me. I greatly prefer their natural setting, but tastes can, of course, vary. The screen itself isn't entirely borderless, but it's close with minimal bezels and a hole punch array for the front-facing selfie camera. Unlocking gets handled biometrically with a fingerprint sensor. And look, here, while enrollment of individual fingers, easy enough to do, no real problems there, this is one of those rare phones, and it's rare these days that I even pick up on this, where I did have some issues with the biometric unlocking. Nothing that kept me out of the phone, but a few more false negatives than I would have liked to see, really. Controls are otherwise minimalistic, with power and volume buttons on the right-hand side and a SIM card slot on the right. You don't get a headphone jack on the phone, just a USB-C port at the base for power and data. And look, physically, the Reno11F 5G is a pleasant phone to hold and use. It's relatively light at 177 grams, and it's also notable within this price bracket for having properly rated water resistance. It's IP65, which is not the highest you can get for sure, but it's nice to see. Now, I have to point out, because I always point this out, IP ratings are not, hey, you can go surfing or swimming or reef diving or whatever you like with this phone. No, they're done with fresh lab water, which means that they don't take into account things like salt or pool chemicals or things like that. Do that at your own risk, but at least with this phone, you've got better than usual odds of surviving. Here in Australia, the Oppo Reno11F 5G sells in two different colours, either palm green, which is green, quite a nice looking green by the look of it, or ocean blue, which is what I've tested with. It does appear there's a third colour in some markets called coral purple, but we don't get that one locally. Now look, I've said on the record, I like blue as a phone colour, but I'm a little bit split about this one. And it's basically because Oppo's done something slightly different. You don't get a single colour or a colour gradient, but instead this blue colour with a wave pattern embedded in it, which kind of makes it look like you're staring at the top of a swimming pool. And I keep flip-flopping between, hey, that's really cool and I like it, to, no, I don't like it that much and I think I'd probably rather have that on a phone case where I could change out. I suppose the thing is, you could always throw a phone case onto this and change it to whatever colour you liked. And at least we're getting some nice, bright, fun colours to play with here. Oppo often trades on its reputation as a camera phone company, and it very much wants you to know that the Reno11F 5G is a camera phone. You kind of can't miss it, because when you flip it over, you're greeted with these two circular lens arrays, one much larger than the other. The larger one houses a 64 megapixel wide sensor, while the smaller one has two sensors, an 8 megapixel ultra wide and 2 megapixel macro lens. Run at the front, selfies are handled by a 32 megapixel sensor. Let's start with the selfies. So here it does a pretty good job, although rather predictably, and it's certainly not alone in this, beautification is on by default. And look, I actually have some wrinkles. I've earned those wrinkles, damn it. I want my wrinkles, and I can actually have them. This is just the default selfie setting I'm showing you here. The 2 megapixel macro is, well, look, I've said this before in other reviews. 2 megapixel macro on mid-range camera equals probably not worth using most of the time. This is not much different. You can get okay-ish macro shots, but you're really going to have to work for them to get them, and most of the macro shots you'll get will not look that good. I kind of wish they'd opted for a different lens type here, but they're certainly not doing anything that other makers aren't doing in this space. What you don't get, of course, here is any kind of telephoto, although there is a 2x zoom on the default camera app. That's just digital zoom, punches up to 10x zoom. So How well does that work? Well, look, I'll run through a quick series of photos here. This is just me looking at a bench over the road as it happens. And the ultra wide is fine, and the wide is fine too. And 2 times, which obviously is not that much magnification, it's just a crop of that 64 meg sensor, that's fine too. Now, at 10 times, yeah, that's pushing it a little far, a little bit further, in fact, that some of its competitors go. Most of the phones in this kind of price range tend to top out at 8 times crop. This one does 10, and I'm not sure that the results are always worth it, but you can get some reasonable kind of digital zooms. As always, I'd advise to take the wide shot and crop it in post-processing software instead, but at least the option is there. Video quality for the Reno11F, yeah, that's fine too. And look, basically, this is quite a decent, quite a capable, quite a fun shooter. And I like that in a mid-range phone. Oppo's done pretty well here, I think. And I think most people, after this kind of phone experience, will not be unhappy with what it delivers. It's not absolutely the best in class. Honestly, right now, that would be trying to get a bargain basement Pixel 7a, but the stock of those is absolutely running out because the Pixel 8a is now here. And so otherwise, this is a good competitor in that actually new $599 space. What about performance? Well, the Reno11F 5G is built around a MediaTek Dimensity 7050 processor with 8 gig of RAM and a pretty generous 256 gig of storage, at least locally, and that is expandable via microSD card. It's actually the first Dimensity 7050 based system to pass through my hands. From the looks of it, Oppo and BBK stalemate Realme, who don't operate in Australia anymore as far as I can see, really like using it on a lot of phones internationally. And so I was kind of keen to compare how it was going to run against other phones you can get at about that $600 Australian asking price. Because MediaTek's Dimensity line has tended to punch slightly above its price weight in prior phones, but not so much this time. In Benchmarks, and I have a full written review where you can look at the tables of this in more detail. They don't present so well on YouTube, but in Benchmarks, the Reno11F 5G tended towards the bottom of the pack in terms of CPU and GPU performance. Not by huge quantities. This certainly isn't a terrible performer, but this certainly isn't up there with some of the other better phones you can get around this price. Things like the Galaxy A35, Motorola Edge 40, or again, the Google Pixel 7a are a bit faster, a bit punchier. Now, benchmarks are quite useful comparatives, but real-world app testing also has its role to play. And here, look, the Reno11F 5G performs pretty much as I would expect it to do. Most apps will run okay. You won't get higher-end Android games running at highest resolution and highest refresh rates, even with that 120 hertz screen, because the GPU is not quite up to that level. But you can certainly get them to run. They're certainly adequate in that sense. The Reno11F 5G, of course, runs Oppo's own ColorOS launcher, and I am on the record as saying I'm not a huge fan of ColorOS. Now, at one level, this is fine, because it's Android. You can make it look however you like. Oppo does throw a few interesting wrinkles into ColorOS these days. As I said, it's been a while since I've reviewed one of their phones, and there are a few neat little applications. There's a stock clipboard called FileDock, for example, which makes it fairly easy to throw data between different applications at ease. The weird thing here is that Oppo actually disables it by default. It's like, we've got this feature on the phone and we sort of don't want you to know it's here. If you did not know it existed, you would never find this thing, which is just, it's kind of weird to me. It really very much is. But as I say, it's Android. You can style it however you like. ColorOS's semi-iOS thing has never entirely done it for me, but a lot of people do seem to like that. And obviously, that semi-iOS styling might make it a really good choice if you were looking to switch from an iPhone. One thing that I don't think is quite as good a choice is the fact that Oppo installs a lot of additional apps on the Oppo Reno11F 5G. And I mean a lot. Tons of low-rent Android games, TikTok, Booking, Spotify, Temu, AliExpress, a couple of others. I don't like this approach. I totally get it. I know money changes hands in order for those apps to automatically be there, but I really don't like having lots of extra apps installed on my phone. Please stop doing this, Oppo. All of this, of course, runs on Android 14, and here I've got one note of caution because I can't find any details about Oppo's update schedule for this phone. Now, at the time of testing, it had security updates up to April 2024, which is nicely contemporary for when I'm recording this. But look, Oppo's competitors are starting to be considerably more upfront about how many OS upgrades, when you'll get security updates, and for how long. And they just don't seem to have done this with this particular phone, which is disappointing. I'm hoping it'll get a few, but I don't know that for sure, and I just can't seem to find the detail. It's not evident to consumers, and I really feel like it should be. As its suffix suggests, the Oppo Reno11F 5G is 5G capable if you're in a 5G coverage area. Now, I've tested it with the Telstra 5G network in Sydney, and it's performed pretty much exactly as every other 5G phone does. Typically, I was seeing somewhere between 200 to 400 meg down on it. Obviously, that's my local area network, and as I keep on saying, mobile network performance varies by area. It depends where you are. It depends if you've got that kind of coverage. I've certainly not had major problems with things like phone calls on it or with data access for the most part, except in areas where I would have data access problems anyway. Going into lifts, some shopping centres local to me, there's a couple of really weak spots I know of, and yeah, it fell apart there, but every phone that I've ever tested does. No particular difference there. 5G remains a nice to have, though, not a must have feature at this point in time. On the battery front, the Reno11F 5G is built around a 5,000 milliamp hour battery, and that is just absolutely the stock standard for pretty much every Android phone right now that doesn't fold. That's not interesting, even though a lot of phone makers will kind of go, ooh, 5,000, we've got a big number right here. It's just not that exciting to me. What's far more exciting, what's far more interesting to me is how long batteries last and how long it takes to recharge them. So to check battery endurance, first of all, I turned to my standard YouTube video rundown test. Now, again, I've got full benchmarks in my written review. There's a link in the description below for that one. But the simple story here is that an hour's worth of 1080p YouTube sapped about 6% of the Reno11F 5G's battery, which is not best in class, but it's not terrible either. What I really tend to look for there is at least 90%, because below 90% indicates a phone that probably won't last out a typical day. Everyone's usage is kind of different. In more ad hoc usage, yeah, look, this is fine for battery usage. I tended to find that the Reno11F 5G would be sitting on about 20 to 30% battery at the end of a day of my using it. Your own experience, of course, may vary depending on how heavily you use it, but a single day easy, multi-day maybe, but then you're going to have to reach for a charger. And of course, this is where it gets interesting, because Oppo's had this long push for very fast charging, what it now calls Super VOOC charging. The Reno11F 5G comes with a 67-watt charger. It's a chunky little beast too. And look, speed-wise, it utterly wipes the floor with anything else in its class when it comes to charging speed. And I'll be honest here, there is something that genuinely tickles my geeky nerves nicely when I plug in a charger and instantly see percentage point rises, even if they're just decimal rises, on the power straight away. Recharging this thing really fast. Of course, you don't have to use a Super VOOC charger. It can take power from other chargers at different rates. They will be, of course, a little bit slower. Oppo's claim is that all of this fast charging, while it might make the phone a little bit warmer, will not adversely affect the battery life over the life of the phone. Obviously, I can't test that within my review period because I don't have a time machine and time to test this battery for, 5, 6 or more years. But so far, and again, I'm pulling from some slightly older phones here, but so far, yeah, VOOC phones seem to have done pretty well at that. I'm not aware of too many complaints. If you know of some, of course, leave them in the comments below. So does that make the Reno11F 5G a phone you should buy? Well, perhaps. As always, perhaps, because there are so many choices in the mid-range right now. This is a really good choice if you want a nice solid camera phone with a really good design and a nice screen and really good battery specs, both battery life but also battery charging. It gets that balance really nice. Conversely, though, it is not the most powerful phone in its class. You can get a more powerful phone than this in terms of application performance for the same kind of money. And that Android upgrade picture, I'm not so certain on. That gives me pause for thought. But at $599, this is a pretty good, pretty decent deal. It's certainly worth considering. Anyway, that's my take on the Oppo Reno11F 5G. What do you think? Got an opinion? Let me know in the comments below, and as always, thanks for watching, and don't forget to hit like and subscribe.